Hello, my name is Kristi Norman, Department Manager for Business Development and Marketing with the Geospatial and Asset Management Division. I'd like to welcome everyone to Power Engineers webinar today, The Way Forward. A few housekeeping notes before we begin. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please submit to all panelists through the Q&A window. We will be answering questions at the end of the presentation. Let me begin by introducing our presenters. Brittany Dizdar is a senior consultant with the Geospatial and Asset Management Division at Power Engineers. She is currently responsible for the electric network and equipment data from many repositories that feed the Advanced Distribution Management System at several utilities. Specializing in geographic information, her work spans across both information technology and operational technology. Prior to her 7 years at Power, she had long stints at SCANA and Arizona Public Service. Brittany has a BS in Computer Science from the University of South Carolina. Also presenting today will be Robert Krisher. Robert is also a senior consultant in the Geospatial and Asset Management Group with Power Engineers, who also happens to have a computer science degree. He cut his teeth implementing enterprise GIS and graphic work design solutions for electric and gas utilities, but has spent the last few years of his career laser focused on learning and teaching as much as he can about ArcGIS Pro and the utility network. Now that I've had the opportunity to introduce our presenters, I will pass it on to Robert. Robert?
Thanks, Kristi. So it's been a while since we've had our last webinar. And in the previous webinar with you all, we focused on the utility network, how this new model provided tools for maintaining a higher level of data quality within your organization. And we had a lot of customers who were still trying to figure out where the utility network was. And we felt it was important to have this discussion about this new and upcoming technology so we could talk about its strengths and really some of the challenges you'll face when you implement it. If you haven't already seen our first webinar, I highly recommend you go back and watch it, and you can reach out to Kristi for a link to that. However, even if you haven't seen our previous webinar, you'll still be able to fully appreciate the content of this webinar. Also, in the interest of recapping things, Esri's had a busy year. So just in the past year, Esri's released new industry models for all of the utility network domains. So this is your electric distribution and transmission, gas distribution and transmission, water, wastewater, and storm. They've heard your feedback, and they've heard business partner feedback, and they've really put in a lot of work to make these new models meet your needs. Last year, they also introduced a new licensing model. This model focused for ArcGIS Enterprise clients who are trying to have a more streamlined process to get the right users the right applications without having to go through all the hassles of understanding the differences between different extensions and applications and licensing levels. Finally, there have been multiple releases of both ArcGIS Enterprise and ArcGIS Pro. They've added significant capabilities to the product, but that's the discussion for another webinar. So we've all been busy. As you know, our first priority at Power Engineers is the projects we're working on with you, our clients. And while most of you continue to work with the geometric, we've also worked with a number of you on beginning to plan your transition to the utility network. To this end, we've performed almost a dozen different data assessments, roadmaps, way forward workshops. We've even been so lucky to have one of you go live with the utility network itself. And it's this last point that we wanted to talk to you next about. And with that, I'll hand it off to Brittany. Brittany?
Thanks, Robert. As Robert said, we implemented the utility network at Guam Power Authority, and we wanted to discuss with you some of the challenges and lessons learned that we experienced from that project. First, a little bit about Guam Power Authority. GPA is located on the island of Guam. Guam is an unincorporated and organized territory of the United States in Micronesia. It is the westernmost point and territory of the United States. GPA was established in 1968 and is public and government owned. The GIS department at GPA consists of 2 GIS analysts and 35 engineering helpers. GPA serves about 50,000 customers and has 28 substations with 646 miles of distribution primary lines. So, the way this project started was a little unusual. We were finishing up another project with them, and they had funding left over and wanted to know if we could help them transition to the utility network. They knew it was important to adopt the utility network as soon as they could and felt this was a good time. They currently use MillSoft for their planning and operation engineers, and the engineers really needed the model in GIS to be enhanced and more detailed. We all looked at what it would take and decided to move forward with some caveats. First, Guam decided they will have to dual map. And what I mean by that is they would perform updates to the GIS data in both the geometric network and the utility network. We determined this to be the best option for GPA, mainly for training and integration purposes. There are still a good many of third parties that do not support the utility network yet, so we decided to put most integrations off until phase 2. Training was going to be difficult also, because it's not like they can take 35 mappers to training, so we came up with another idea. Mapping in both the geometric network and utility network would give them that on-the-job training, which is really the best way to learn and develop the best practices. This technology is new, and there's not a lot of material published yet. They are really the first, so this was our scope. We were going to upgrade them to ArcGIS Enterprise 10.6, migrate to ArcGIS Pro 2.2 in the utility network, identify and migrate customizations where applicable, and migrate the web application being used by the customer service. Well, not too long after we started, we made the call to upgrade to 10.7. In addition, we decided to upgrade ArcGIS Pro and the utility network model to 2.3.3. There were some changes that we needed in these versions, especially in the model. We had been working with Esri on these changes, and they were being implemented as part of those releases, so we decided to make the move. Overall, the project was a success, and GPA was very satisfied with what we had accomplished, and we learned a lot on the way. Of course, we did have some challenges, and now I'll be walking you through some of those challenges and lessons learned. Some of the challenges that we faced during this project had to do with data, technology, and integrations. We tried to mitigate the training challenge up front with the decision to map in both the geometric network and utility network, which was a good idea for them and proved to be very helpful. The viewing tools are different, the editing tools are different. How you administer the utility network is very different. Think about when Microsoft first released their ribbon toolbar. There was some confusion, but everyone had to trudge through it. And for the most part, everyone is using it just as well as the old Microsoft products. It's a little like that when trying to find the tools you need. The tools are pretty much the same. You just need to find them and get used to the way they run. I took some online courses to help get familiar with ArcGIS Pro and the UN. And POWER, of course, also provided some on-site training. Another challenge we faced was data, both the geometric network data as well as the migrated network data. First, there was inconsistent data standards in the geometric network that caused the migration to the utility network issues. For instance, the length of the primary or secondary tapping off of primary where a transformer bank is installed, or the length of the bus inside a switch bank, the rotation of the transformer or switch. All of these play a big role in migrating geometric network data to the utility network. And having standards really assists with a successful migration and less cleanup after the migration. Device connections to lines also caused some challenges. We had instances where overhead primary and underground primary were connected without a device in between. Inconsistent data standards in existing geometric network. There's just so much you can model in GIS now, and we did an initial data modeling workshop, but after the first migration, we knew we needed to look at the data mapping again and expand a little. Depending on what level you want to model, you can use different types of junctions. As I mentioned before, we also switched to a different data in the middle of the project. Asset groups and types changed, and we needed to revisit the data model and mapping again. You definitely need to plan on several iterations of data migrations. Integrations was an additional challenge we faced, but more towards the beginning of the project. The GIS data at Guam is used by many different places and by different people: planning engineers, customer service, operations, field personnel, and others all consume the GIS data. We had already decided going into this project that we would push most integrations to phase 2, which we are working on now. This way, the integrations that were not compatible with the utility network can still use the geometric network. You see, hardly any third parties are supporting the utility network or have tools that are compatible with the utility network right now. They, of course, have a plan to support the utility network in the future, but most of them are just not there yet. So there was not much we could do about that at this time. We were, however, able to migrate the map services that were being consumed by others to use the utility network with minimal changes. Lastly, technology. It's new. Hardly anyone is actually using the utility network in a production environment. All new technology, there will be issues, but we were able to minimize the impact of those by utilizing Esri support. Finally, after all is said and done, what did we learn? Well, lots, but I will cover only a few for now. We had executed performance benchmarking up front, and everything seemed okay, just as good as it was with the geometric network. Guam had the minimal required hardware. Once we loaded, we did notice a spike in memory on the client side. This was something that we were not expecting, and maybe with some more performance testing and benchmarking, we could have seen this before go live. We had to bring in Guam's IT and get more hardware ordered. Another lessons learned is that we should have brought their IT group, Guam's IT group, in as we were doing the initial benchmarking. At Guam, the GIS and IT departments are separate, and anything out of the norm needs to be significantly justified and proven. They will not just take vendor requirements as a standard. Another learning we had early on and decided to make this part of our process is after every migration, review the data mapping and data standards. We developed our data mapping up front and established data standards after the first migration. And we found we had a much better migration of data if we did little mini data modeling sessions and data standard workshops after each migration. We moved the data about 5 times during this project, and each time the migrated data was substantially better and did not require a bunch of manual cleanup and or programming cleanup. Last but not least, I believe the phased approach we took was the right choice, holding off most integrations until phase 2 and allowing the time to really learn and mapping processes with the utility network really paid off. They are mapping in both the geometric network and utility network, but that is giving them what they need to be able to really get to know the new model and tools and be successful. Back at you, Robert.
Thanks, Brittany. Now that we've looked at what went on with Guam, what we wanted to do is we wanted to take this opportunity to reflect on the work that we've done in the past year. We've learned a lot through the utility network implementation at Guam and through a lot of the assessments and roadmaps we've done with many of you. And what we wanted to do was pull that all together into a single presentation that we could give all our clients to help them plan for change going forward. So to start with, let's take a look at what Esri's checklist has been for the past several years for getting ready to implement the utility network and stay in support. The first recommendation has been that utilities need to get onto the 10.6.1 version of ArcMap. Support for 10.2.1 ends next year, so if you're not on 10.6.1 right now, you should either be planning to get on it, or be prepared to implement the utility network in order to stay in report. The other recommendation Esri has been making is that customers should implement ArcGIS Portal, although now it's called ArcGIS Enterprise. You know, ArcGIS Enterprise is the core of the Esri experience going forward and is required in order to transition to the utility network. Customers who implement it now will have an easier time transitioning to the utility network going forward. Next, let's take a look at what POWER's recommendation is. So on top of everything that Esri recommends, there's also several additional steps that POWER recommends you follow. Our first recommendation has to do with implementing ArcGIS Enterprise. We feel it's not just enough to install ArcGIS Enterprise and all of the software that it contains. There's so much additional value provided by ArcGIS Enterprise that if you're not actively using it in your daily activities, you're missing out on a lot of the value of ArcGIS. There's still a lot of customers out there who are unsure of what this value is or who need some help getting up to speed on all these new technologies. And for those customers, we recommend that you develop and implement a training plan to start fully leveraging your investment in ArcGIS Enterprise. Finally, we recommend that customers take a closer look at their data. While this is absolutely required for implementing the utility network, as Brittany alluded to with the Guam implementation, it's something that many customers need to undertake anyways as they continue to implement SCADA, engineering analysis, outage management, and especially for electric customers as they move towards implementing an advanced distribution management system, or ADMS. Getting your data into shape for these applications is a journey that takes quite some time, and the larger you are as an organization, the sooner you need to begin. So, as a quick recap, here's your checklist. You should upgrade to 10.6.1, install ArcGIS Enterprise, do training, start using ArcGIS Enterprise in your day-to-day activities, and then you need to take a closer look at your data. And while those are great high-level takeaways, what we wanted to do was we really wanted to drill down into the recommendations that POWER has. So, the first of these is the platform. This is a word that you hear Esri talking a lot about nowadays. They talk about it at the user conference, they talk about it at GeoConnects, and it really is important. But one of the things that I get asked a lot is, well, what is the platform? So engaging with the platform, it's more than just Portal. It's more than just ArcGIS Enterprise. It's this sort of grab-all term that we use to talk about the technology, right? It's moving from 32-bit to 64-bit, from databases to REST service endpoints, map services to web maps. It's also about the applications, transitioning from an entirely desktop-based solutions to a combination of desktop, web, and mobile applications. Now, these applications are free applications that Esri provides that are built on top of the platform, ArcGIS Enterprise, that'll help you meet the needs of your business. These applications rely heavily on application templates and configuration and give you the ability to deploy targeted experiences to users without the need to hire a developer or even write code. And with these two things, with this platform, Esri has fundamentally changed the value proposition for GIS in the utility industry. We're transitioning from web to web and mobile applications instead of relying on desktop. There's a big push for using out-of-the-box software instead of third-party applications. You know, one of the reasons why Guam perhaps was able to move forward the way that it was without third-party support is because so much of what they relied on in their day-to-day workflows no longer required third-party software customizations. It was now all out of the box. Takes me to my third point. Esri is relying very heavily on configuration and templates instead of customizing the application through extensions and third-party software. So, what's going on? What's the net effect of this? Well, the net effect of this is that Esri is pushing ArcGIS Enterprise to be the center of everything that you're doing with Esri going forward. And that's really why they call it the platform. So what is the platform? Well, at the high level, the platform is ArcGIS Enterprise, but it's also all of your applications. It's all of your devices. The platform really represents everything that you do with your GIS and making sure that it's available to every single person in your organization. And that's whether they're in the office or the field, on the desktop or a mobile phone, connected or disconnected, everyone should have access to the same GIS information so that they can make the same decisions. Now, to get this value, it means that you're going to be leveraging a lot of these apps provided by Esri. I don't have time to go through all of these right now, but if your team isn't already using these technologies and these applications, then they need to get training on them. So let's talk about training. So for those of you who have staff who are good self-starters, who are very technical and familiar with Esri, Esri has a number of free online courses and tutorials that you can take. These provide a good introduction to these different technologies and are suitable for many power users and administrators. However, when you need to train your end users or when there's trainees who are going to have a lot of questions, you'll want to make sure you have an instructor-led class. Both Esri and POWER have a number of instructor-led classes and workshops that we offer to cover a wide array of topics, all the way from ArcGIS Pro and the utility network to how to implement ArcGIS Enterprise and all of the various applications that go along with it. Now, when you're doing project-specific work, we typically recommend that team members participate in an instructor-led course. And if the timing and pricing is right, you can sometimes take one of the classes provided by Esri. However, if the timing isn't right, POWER can always hold several-day accelerated training workshops with project staff to get them brought up to speed with these new technologies. The benefit of doing a workshop like this is that you get the material that's specific to your workflows and your data. And most importantly, the timing's right. One of the most important parts of training is the timing. If you aren't regularly making use of the new skills and technologies that you learned, there's a tendency to forget a lot of that content. So before you train, make sure that your staff has access to an internal training or sandbox environment so they can practice the skills that they learned. You also need to make sure that your trainees will continue to use these skills that they've learned, spending at least a few hours a week in the environment, putting those newly learned skills to use. Finally, I want to talk with you about data. Data quality, data model, data standards, data conversion. It seems like the last and biggest challenge of almost any GIS project is always the data. So first, let's take a look at standards. The utility network introduces a lot of new concepts, including containment, assemblies, associations. All these things sound strange, but they're really just based off of your existing data and your existing relationships. The good news is that the utility network includes standard models for each commodity that define exactly how you need to model your data. Now, these models can and frequently are adjusted to meet project and customer needs, but we find that the difference between customer models tends to be fairly minor in the new utility network model, as opposed to what you would see in a traditional geometric network implementation. Now, the challenge is that in order to fully leverage this investment in this new model, there's likely going to be some data gaps that need to be bridged between your old model and your new model. So in order to identify these data gaps, POWER recommends holding a standard workshop where POWER reviews your data and the utility network model, and we identify these gaps, what they are, and how to bridge them. These workshops are important for all commodities, but they're absolutely critical for electric customers because of the amount of change that the electric model goes through when you implement the utility network. If you haven't already had one of these workshops yet, we highly recommend that customers have one of these workshops within the next year. Finally, let's talk about health checks. Once you define what your standards are and what your gaps are, what we then typically do is perform a data health check. In the case of Esri or other third-party vendors, this often takes the form of using some third-party software to monitor data quality. So this would be things like Esri's Data Reviewer or even Operations Dashboard that'll look at your core GIS data and report out the number of issues. Now, this is great for making sure that the conversion goes smoothly and that you've got a clean source data set, but to get a full picture of the types and numbers of data gaps that you have, you're really going to need to look at your data in the final model. Addressing these gaps can be done through a number of scripted and automated processes as part of your implementation. But what you'll really want to know and focus on is how many of your data gaps need to be addressed manually and need to be addressed before you can do your implementation. In addition to these issues that you need to address ahead of your implementation, you also need to bear in mind that there may also be data model changes, post-data cleanup, or even field data collections that you may need to run through in order to get through your implementation. Finally, once you've got all of that pulled together, we really recommend customers pull together a roadmap. Utilities are never stagnant, and implementing major changes like this could take careful planning. At POWER, we've done this with nearly a dozen different clients in the form of our readiness assessments. Now, this typically involves the standards workshop, a health assessment, a gap analysis, as well as some training for your POWER users. And the end result of this is a roadmap that outlines how much time needs to be set aside in order to address those data issues ahead of your implementation, along with a rough timeline for implementation, including how much time will need to be devoted to adjusting your model, rebuilding interfaces, as well as redoing customizations. The first step towards implementing the utility network is always to start resolving your data quality issues ahead of your implementation. And we found that the workload for this pre-implementation, while it varies for every customer, but small to medium utilities are typically seeing about 1 to 2 FTEs worth of additional work for about 6 months in order to go live with a fully connected, clean utility network model. In conclusion, let's pull up the final checklist. You're going to want to implement 10.6.1. You're going to want to make sure that you've got ArcGIS Enterprise installed and up and running. You're going to want to make sure that you've got your staff trained up on how to use ArcGIS Enterprise. And you're going to want to make sure that you're actually using ArcGIS Enterprise. Survey 1, 2, 3, collector, workforce, that kind of stuff. Next, you want to make sure that you're taking a look at your data. Ideally, you're going to do a standards workshop and a health check to get all those issues lined out so that you can ultimately put together your roadmap and know exactly how much time you need to set aside for your implementation. Well, that being said, we hope that many of you are going to be attending GeoConnects, and if you do, we hope you come listen to us. We're actually going to be doing 3 presentations there. Brittany is going to be doing a presentation with Guam Power Authority, really deep diving what she talked about today about their implementation, what they learned, and what they wish they would have known ahead of that. We're also going to be presenting with the customer, Madison Gas and Electric, talking about the process that they went through to prepare for the utility network. Now, they have some special challenges because they're both gas and electric commodities, and I really recommend you check that one out. Finally, in line with our ArcGIS Enterprise theme, we're going to be talking about some of the work that we and one of our business partners did with the Orlando Utilities Commission, talking about how we were able to use ArcGIS Enterprise and some mobile applications to integrate damage assessment and outage management into hurricane response, all using ArcGIS. Finally, when you're not going to those presentations, we recommend that you stop by our booth. We're going to be booth 207, and we're going to be doing a number of lightning talks throughout the day. Not only are we going to be recapping some of our presentations, but we're also going to have live hands-on demos where we're going to be showing you about how to implement some of these configurable ArcGIS Enterprise solutions, as well as how you can use business intelligence to create value using ArcGIS Enterprise. For those of you who are just looking to go to 10.6.1 right now, Brittany's got a great lightning talk she's going to be giving you about how those Feeder Manager 2 rules that just came out in 10.6.1 will really help you get ready for your ADMS. That being said, I'd like to thank you all for all your time. And if you want any additional information or you have any questions about demos, please contact Kristi at the following address. Thank you.
We'd like to thank everyone for attending today. And if you could please take a few moments after this recording to fill out a brief survey, we would appreciate it. Thank you.